Now what we're going to have a look at is the simple interest formula. We're going to have a look at how we can use the simple interest formula to not only calculate the interest earned, but also how the formula can be rearranged to be able to calculate things like the principal or the interest rate or time. But before we get to that, it's really important that we really get to know and understand what simple interest actually is. So when we're talking about simple interest, we could be talking about this in savings or loans. It does exist in both. Basically what we're essentially, because we're talking about savings at the minute, what we're essentially saying is when we go and put an amount of money, let's say we're going to go and put $100 into the bank for an investment. What we're going to do is the bank's going to give us a percentage of that $100, of whatever sum we put into the bank to begin with, back to us every single year. So they might say, hey, we're going to give you 10% interest. I mean, that's very generous, but 10% interest. So essentially, after the first year, they're going to give us $10 back of our $100. So we're going to have $110 in the bank. But on the second year, they're just going to give us 10% of the original $100. So they're going to give us an extra $10 back. They're not actually going to take 10% of the balance there at year 2. So they're not going to give us 10% of $110. They're just going to give us the percentage of the original investment or the original principal. So that's where this formula sort of derives from. It's a percentage of formula that also has this time that's multiplied because it's going to be the same percentage of this principal. All right, but you're going to multiply it by however many years that you're investing for. So that's sort of where this comes from. So the capital I here is the interest earned, the P is the principal, the lowercase I is the interest rate. It's really important whenever you're using this in a formula, the interest rate needs to be a decimal. And the N here is time in years. Now, you might see this written in different ways. So I know I've seen it before as I equals PRT, so principal, rate, and time. It's the same formula. All right, so if you see it written in a different way, it is the same formula and you can just follow the same steps that we're going to show you here. So let's get into some questions though. So in front of me, I've got $10,000 that was invested in a flat rate. Now, flat rate's a really, really important word that you need to get to know. It means simple interest, but it's been invested at a flat rate of 6% per annum over 4 years and 3 months. Now, it's really important here that when we note this time needs to be in years. So we're going to have to get these months into years, which we'll do in a moment. So what do I do with these sorts of questions? The first thing I like to always do whenever you're dealing with a formula is to write down the information that you've got. So you can use this either by highlighting it in the question, that can be really effective, or you can just write it down. So the $10,000, that's our principal. So our principal here is $10,000. Our interest rate is 6% per annum. And our time, so our N, is going to be 4 years and 3 months. Now, we need to convert this into just years itself. Now, 3 months is a quarter of the year, so we could just put it 1/4. If you ever didn't know that, though, what you can actually do is go, well, how many months are there in a year? And that's what you need to divide by. So it would be 3 divided by 12. But of course, we can see that 3 divided by 12 is just going to simplify to 1/4. So I'm just going to write it straight here as 1/4. And what's neat here is our calculator can enter fractions and things like that. So we don't really need to convert it to a decimal or anything like that, or an improper fraction. We can just put it as 4 1/4 like this. So from here, what we need to do is we need to put this into our formula. So this is going to be the interest is equal to the principal, which is 10,000. Multiplied by the interest rate. Now, it's really important here that the interest rate needs to be as a decimal. So it's given to us as a percentage. We need to divide by 100 to get it as a decimal. So this is going to be 0.06. I probably should have done that before. You can essentially just move the decimal place over twice. So in our formula here, it's going to be 0.06. And then that's going to be multiplied by N, which is 4 1/4. So essentially we now just get our calculator out and we chuck these values in. So got 10,000 multiplied by 0.06 multiplied by 4 1/4. And we find that the interest is $2,550. Now, what's important to note here is this formula finds the interest, not the new balance of the account, so not the future value, which is something that you'll see when we move on to compound interest. So if we want to find what the balance is at that time, or find the total of the investment at the end here, we need to grab this interest that we just calculated and add it to the principal that we started with. So the total will be equal to what we started with, which was $10,000, and added with $2,550. So therefore our total here is $12,550. Important that we include units here, so let's whack that sign in there. So that's how we use the formula if we want to calculate the interest earned. Now, this formula can be rearranged. We can rearrange it to calculate the principal, the interest, and the time. It's really, really good if you know how to rearrange formulas, because if you know how to rearrange formulas, you essentially only need to remember this first formula, and you can then just plug the numbers in, rearrange it, and get the other formulas out, essentially, to be able to find the principal, to be able to find the interest rate, or to be able to find the time. I know you can just write these down because they'll always be the same, but I think knowing how to rearrange the formula is really, really useful. So remember, when we're rearranging, you're essentially doing the opposite to move them to the other side. So if I wanted to be able to find the principal, I'd need to be able to move the interest rate and time to the other side. So I'd need to divide by I and N on this side, which is what you can see just here. So that's how these have come about. So let's have a look at an example of this. So Brian currently has $5,000 and is saving up for a $6,500 holiday. What I like to do in this is I actually like to record the information as I'm going, or highlight them. So either way is really, really good. So he currently has $5,000, so that is the principal. So the principal is $5,000. And he's saving up for a $6,500 holiday. So that's what the total is going to be. So you might just write this in brackets over here or something, I don't know. So total is going to be $6,500. It's really important to know that that's going to be the total, or the future value. He's decided to use a simple interest account with an interest rate of 8%. So that's our I. It's 8%, which is 0.08, to help him save the rest of the money. So how long will it take to reach his goal? So obviously we're calculating N. What we do need to know is what I is, which is the interest that we need to earn. Now the interest we're going to need to earn is the difference between $6,500 and $5,000. So it's just 6.5 take 5,000, which is easy enough doing our heads, 1,500. So we do have all the necessary information here to plug it into this formula here. We've got our interest, we've got our interest rate, and we've got our time. So now we just start using the principal. Oh, hang on, we don't want the principal formula. What am I doing? We're after N. So we've got the interest, the principal, and the interest rate is what I should be saying. So we're after N, which is going to be equal to the total interest that we need, which is 1,500, divided by the principal, which is 5,000, multiplied by our interest rate, which is going to be 0.08. So now, once again, we just put this into our calculator. So 1,500 divided by 5,000 times 0.08. And we find that N is going to be equal to 3 3/4 years. So that sort of summarizes it. We can obviously use the interest, simple interest formula to calculate the interest itself. If you need the future value or the balance at the end, then you need to add that to the principal. But we can also rearrange the formula to either find the principal, the interest rate, or the time.